Thank you, thank you. Wonderful, thank you for that. That was an incredible introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here in Bonn, and thanks everyone for sitting in the dark so we get a little bit more contrast ratio on the screen that'll make the images show up a little bit better here. I have like a little light I can put there on me, maybe that'll help a little bit. You can see if I get text messages during the call. All right. Again, that was wonderful. I got to meet Professor Hullin when he came to visit our laboratory and work with us for some time. It was 10 years ago or something like that? 15 years ago. Oh my gosh, time flies. He looks the same, I don't. It was a great project. We actually did something related to digital faces back then, and that'll be part of what I talk about. I just got done with the FMX conference in Stuttgart, which took me out here, and I was going to share some of what I had to share with that conference with you, talking about some latest developments in volumetric capture and then compositing for virtual production. I think there will be time to talk about sodium vapor matting a little bit, which turned out to capture the imagination even more than expected. The conference that I came from is more of an industry conference, and it's a place where animation companies and visual effects companies will often present their work, and they'll often start their talks with like a company showcase reel, and they'll show all of these punchy results from films and TV shows and making ofs with kind of a pounding music and such to begin. And as an academic, I never had one of those, but thanks to that Emmy Award that I got last year, they managed to, they actually created one of them. So I have like a little 2-minute video. It's a little punchier than it needs to be, but it is a quick overview of a lot of the work that I've been involved in. And if you would like, we will go ahead and we can just start with the little video.
For over 3 decades, scientist-filmmaker Paul Debevec has significantly affected the way we create photoreal visual effects. In college, Paul figured out a new 3D modeling process to build a textured 3D model of his car from photographs. This led to his PhD at UC Berkeley, where he extended these techniques to create sweeping virtual cinematography of the Berkeley campus in his groundbreaking 1997 film, The Campanile Movie. He then developed new techniques for high dynamic range imaging, which enabled his key invention of image-based lighting, a technique to light virtual objects with measurements of real-world illumination. Paul demonstrated these techniques in his films Rendering with Natural Light, set in Berkeley's Eucalyptus Grove, and Fiat Lux, set in a 3D reconstruction of St. Peter's Basilica. HDRI lighting is now an essential technique for adding CGI elements to real-world environments used throughout today's visual effects. Paul then pioneered the process of illuminating live-action actors with image-based lighting. In 2002, he presented Light Stage 3, the first LED stage to surround actors with images of virtual environments, lighting them with the settings the story takes place in. In 2004, Paul designed the first LED volume made from LED panels, producing smooth reflections and displaying clear images of the environments to the actors. The concepts and innovative use of LED lighting Paul pioneered with the Light Stage laid the groundwork for the use of LED lighting in virtual production, which has seen rapid growth as a tool for lighting actors on virtual production stages. And Paul's ongoing research in multispectral light sources, time-multiplexed lighting, and relightable volumetric capture are poised to further revolutionize the way we create television entertainment. The Television Academy is pleased to present the Charles F. Jenkins Lifetime Achievement Award to Paul E. Debevec.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. That was a little introduction. And let's go back to the very beginning of that video. So this was my first project in computer graphics that I did. I was an undergraduate at the University of Michigan. I was home for the summer and I was bored. And the job that I had was not that, it was like writing a database to keep track of the condition of railroad track for the Army Corps of Engineers. And then there was like 2 weeks where there was nothing to do. because the specification hadn't arrived yet. So I had access to a video digitizer, and I just watched the movie Back to the Future, where the DeLorean time machine car flies across the screen at the end of the movie in a very inspiring way. And I didn't drive a DeLorean. I drove a car that's not quite as fancy, called a Chevette at the time, but I thought I'd like to see it fly across the screen as well. And in order to really feel like it was actually my car with the chipped paint and the bent license plate and such, I thought it would be better to model it from photographs. And I came up with an idea that maybe I could go around, take pictures of the car from different directions, solve for a three-dimensional model, and then texture the car with the photographs. And if you project the photographs back on, and then you can show it from new perspectives, it might look close to what the real car looks like. So this was that little animation that I did in that little summer internship that I was working on. And the people I worked with thought it was pretty cool. And it was enough to get me accepted to graduate school and invited to be part of Professor Jitendra Malik's research group. So I am, I might be in the top 5 best known people in this photo, but I'm probably not even in the top 3 anymore at this point with some of the work that's been going on with machine learning these days. But it was really quite an honor and experience to be part of Jitendra Malik's research group. This year was one of my office mates, Alyosha Efros, and he went to Carnegie Mellon, and he came back. He's a professor at Berkeley now, and it was 2 of his students that graduated, went to OpenAI, and created Sora, or the lead authors on Sora, if you've heard of this AI-generated video thing. So I can say I was office mates with their PhD advisor. The main thesis work that I did in collaboration with a postdoc named C.J. Taylor was also about reconstructing scenes from photographs, and instead of doing a car, I thought it would be more exciting to do buildings. And we came up with a technique where if you mark some lines on the photos, 'cause it's pretty easy to see the architectural lines, and then if you build up a model out of 3D shape primitives, it's hard to know exactly what shape or exactly where they should be, but if you kind of click on this line is this part of the model, this line is this part of the model, you can do an optimization process that solves for the size and shape of everything. You get a 3D model of your scene, you can project the photos back on, and you can generate novel views like you can see over here. And we actually published that as a paper at SIGGRAPH 96, so that was my first paper at this computer graphics conference called SIGGRAPH, which as soon as I started going to that, I definitely was constantly inspired to keep working in the field of computer graphics. The next SIGGRAPH will happen this August in the city of Denver, in amongst our mountains that we have. And SIGGRAPH is not just an academic papers program, but it also has an art gallery, an expo floor, places for emerging technology demos, and a computer animation festival. And I was very inspired by seeing all the computer animated films people would do. And I thought, why not just, instead of having some little results at the end of the paper, maybe we can try to make a movie using some of the technology. So I recruited a team of students, and in early 1997, I took pictures of the Berkeley Tower in the middle of the campus, some pictures from a kite. I got help from an architecture professor to fly a kite. Today we do a drone, but we had a kite back then. And then we worked to extend the software in a real-time rendering system to make what we called the Campanile movie. And this was actually could be real-time rendering over 25 years ago now. And we were all excited because, if you suspend a little bit of disbelief, you can feel like you're flying over the real campus for that. And to make it a little bit more fun, there were some cross-dissolve transitions back to the real world with some match moving that we did in our software. And we got a bit of a flight path kind of transitioning between the computer-generated and the real. So that film showed in the SIGGRAPH 97 electronic theater, they called it. And one of the people who was in the audience was a visual effects supervisor working on a big new movie. And he figured out that this would be a useful technique to create virtual backgrounds for some of the scenes in the film. And so he actually ended up hiring one of the graduate students that I'd supervised on the project. They got our software running over at their facility to do 3D scene reconstruction for this particular scene. He actually called me up on the phone and asked how should I take the pictures before I go there. And it came out pretty well. And these virtual backgrounds that you'll see were part of a relatively popular movie.
Trinity! Help!
And that was pretty fun, but I didn't go directly to work on the movies at that point because I had a couple of other ideas I wanted to explore in the research. And one of them had to do with lighting. Because when I would see movies like Jurassic Park, and I'd see how realistic the dinosaurs would look, I knew they were computer generated. What impressed me the most about them is how much it looked like that dinosaur is really there. Like it's lit by the same light as the actors who are trying to run away from it. And you know, it looks like not just pasted in. And I kind of thought, well, if I were to do this, I wouldn't know how to make it look like it's really there. And I talked to some of the artists at Industrial Light and Magic, and they said, well, they have a bunch of techniques to try to, you know, write down where the lighting sources were, and they kind of move computer-generated lights until it kind of looks right to the eye. And they have great artists there, they can do that. But that wasn't a satisfying solution. I thought there should be some way to light your computer-generated object directly with the light that was really there in the scene. And that was the idea of image-based lighting, which leveraged a technique that we published in SIGGRAPH 97 called high dynamic range imaging, where you take a bunch of exposures at different shutter speeds to cover the full dynamic range of light in the scene, all the way from the bright light sources to the large areas of indirect light. And then if you do it as a panoramic image, you can use that as a light source, an image-based light source, to light your computer-generated objects with the light that was really there. And so that was a paper at SIGGRAPH 98, and we did a couple of animations at SIGGRAPH 98, and then SIGGRAPH 99, Fiat Lux, that Matthias mentioned, which is set in St. Peter's Basilica. So I managed to get over to St. Peter's. They gave me a bit of permission to shoot these mirror ball images and panoramas. We did a photogrammetry reconstruction of the interior, and then we added all of these dynamically simulated objects that were lit by the light that was really there that morning that I took the photos. And so it looked realistic enough to kind of enjoy the visual of these huge monoliths toppling over. And that also is a technique that ended up getting used in the motion picture industry. Lots of movies call for inserting a digital character into the scene where the lighting is correct with the other actors that you'd see. And just as one nice little example,
You're gonna be
this
punching
is from,
guys.
Digital Domain, from a movie over 10 years old now called Real Steel. This is one of our favorite actors here, Hugh Jackman. He also plays Wolverine. He's in a new movie coming out. And they had to put this animated robot that he is teaching how to do boxing. And the robot wasn't really there. It was probably some guy wearing gray pajamas on a wooden box to be the right height. And they would replace it with the computer-generated robot. But to make it look like the robot's there, it has to have the same lighting as the actor. And so they photographed a 360-degree environment near that tree to capture the light. They shot it at multiple exposure settings to put it into an image with floating point pixel values that go 1 to 100,000 if they need to, and then a global illumination engine like V-Ray or Arnold or Octane or Maxwell or Radiance simulates all that light, and then it looks like the robot's really there and we can enjoy the movie. So what I wanted to go back to, because we're going to see how image-based lighting plays into this, is this idea of volumetric capture. So you think about, like, we have this friendly robot over here, and it's nice that computer graphics are so good at rendering a friendly robot, but if you want to try to create a human character, it's a little bit more complicated. Sometime around 10 or 15 years ago, the computer graphics industry did get good enough to render a photoreal digital human. This was a big achievement for the industry. It happened in the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, where there was an old version of Brad Pitt for 40 minutes of the movie, totally digital face. My lab helped with that a little bit, with our light stages to digitize a sculpture of him that was made of wax that was as if he were 70 years old, and help with the lighting for that. But nowadays, it can be interesting to think about more direct capture of a human performance. And you've probably seen some systems where an actor stands in the center, and there's lots of cameras all around, and you want to take all of these two-dimensional views and then derive a three-dimensional model for every frame of their performance, and then you can show it from any angle afterwards. And that's kind of what I did with my car, with that Chevette project, because it was static, so I didn't need lots of cameras. I could just walk around and take the different views to do it. But sometime in the mid-90s, it started becoming interesting to do this with lots of cameras and capture dynamic human performances. And the first project that I know of that took a real swing at this was at Carnegie Mellon University with their project that they called virtualized reality. And I have a little clip of Professor Kanade, who led this effort, with some very early results in volumetric capture.
Is fully covered by many cameras from all directions. The range or depth of every point in an image was computed using the same multi-baseline stereo algorithm used in the video rate stereo machine. The scene can be reconstructed with the depth and intensity information by placing a virtual or soft camera from the front, from the left, from the right, or from the top, or moving the soft camera as the user moves freely. For this baseball scene, we can create a bullseye view.
Virtualized reality has great significance in training, telepresence, and entertainment, in that it would enable users to interact with real event or performance from dynamically selected viewpoints.
So that was a fun and influential project. Obviously, the quality of the results were limited back then. They were trying to run stereo to get depth maps, and then you project the images on depth maps to move around. They made an attempt to scale it up in a very sensational way for a big American football game called the Super Bowl in the year 2001. And what they did for the Super Bowl is they put a bunch of cameras around the rim of the stadium, and they were instrumented so they could kind of track the action. So if the ball's over here, they would have a lot of views over here and over here. And the intention had been that they would do that stereo correspondence on all the views, get a 3D model, and then virtually fly around it right after there was a play. Well, the technique of doing all that solving of the depth maps didn't quite work in time for the show, but they did have these camera arrays, and of course, everyone had seen The Matrix by this point, and they were sort of excited by that effect. And so they actually ended up using it just by kind of playing back through the images quickly to do some 3D-like visualizations in the Super Bowl.
Situations in the case of a challenge cut.
We will talk from time to time tonight about eye vision. If you're wondering what it is, this is what it looks like.
You got a pass rush, quarterback, he drops back. Look, he sees a big lane. Look at that big lane, so he steps up into it. What always makes it easy for a quarterback is to have a clean line of sight. Watch Trent Dilfer, nice look off, looks to his left, and nobody in front of him. Look at that nice lane. He can see the receiver down the field, and what a throw.
On 3rd and 6.
So that was, got some attention then, and it kind of helped academic research continue to look at various forms of volumetric capture over the years. But it really wasn't until 2015, and this paper came out from Microsoft, that volumetric capture really became commercially viable and like a real thing. This project was funded by Microsoft's HoloLens project, and they successfully sold the volumetric capture project as a way to create avatars that you could see in your HoloLens augmented reality, and they actually got these in there. And they had some people, including someone who used to be at Industrial Light and Magic, some good vision researchers, some good graphics researchers, and they collaborated. And they actually had a nice system with about 100 cameras. Some of them were color cameras, some of them were infrared cameras. They took the little infrared dot patterns out of the Microsoft Kinect device that they'd built, and they put a bunch of those around so that in infrared you get some extra texture on the body. They had green screen around so you could use the silhouettes. And they got reasonably high quality meshes for the time of, you know, real people doing real stuff. And then you could see it there. You can see they even made it so that the solve of all the triangle meshes would intentionally put more triangles near the face, so the face would have higher fidelity if you look at that. And this actually did ship with the HoloLens, and there's a couple of commercial stages that have licensed the technology. One in Los Angeles called the Meta Stage. I think they have one in Vancouver as well, and then a few in Europe by Dimension stages. And around the same time in the mid-2010s, when virtual reality was super popular and augmented reality was super popular, that was a way to get funding to build these stages and try to come up with your software pipeline. So other companies like 8i on corporeal, Intel actually built a stage that was 30 meters in diameter and had a number of cameras on there. They actually, though, struggled to get high resolution results because the cameras were very far away from the actors, and they just didn't have enough pixels on people. So most of their demos, they would always show the results very small so that it looked okay. But they had a very impressive stage to visit. At this point, because of virtual reality becoming so popular, my group at USC was given an opportunity to join Google. And Google had created a virtual reality division called Google Daydream. It was done in response to the Oculus and Facebook and all of that. And one of the projects that I was able to get off the ground there was to build a new light stage device at Google. And by working with some people in a group called Augmented Perception, which was run by Shahram Azadi, we collaborated on trying to take our pass at building the best volumetric capture system that we could. And in particular, I wanted to design a system where you can record the actor in a way that if you put them into a new environment, you can light them so they look like they're really there in the environment, because it's always more fun when it looks realistic and you can believe they're really there. So to do that, we wanted to do better than what these systems do. They basically try to put a lot of flat lighting in there, and you just get a flat texture map of your actor. And you can use the rough geometry to kind of relight it a little bit, but that tends not to look very good. What we did in our stage is we designed it so that it doesn't just use the same lighting on the actor the whole time, but it actually alternates very quickly between two different lighting conditions that reveal surface orientation of the actor. It measures a photometric normal. And from these surface normals, you can do better relighting than if you don't have measured surface normals. So this was a project that we published at SIGGRAPH 2019, or SIGGRAPH Asia 2019, called The Relightables. And there's our 3.5 meter device. There's Christoph in there. There's our cameras. We had some custom laser projectors. Those are the two lighting conditions going back and forth. They actually go back and forth so fast you don't even see them. And then we project onto a nice mesh. And if we want to put them into an environment, if we have our diffuse map, our normal map, and a little bit of a gloss map for which parts are shiny or which parts are less shiny, you can drop these guys into scenes relatively realistically. We would then do some follow-up work that would also use machine learning of more detailed reflectance data of seeing the actors lit from lots of directions when they take a couple key poses to then augment this and get even better reflectance properties and more faithful relightings. But this was pretty good for the time. The thing about most of these projects is because they were basically being funded by larger projects in the area of virtual reality and augmented reality. And by 2020, folks had kind of given up on VR headsets. And they were thinking, okay, well, if we want mass adoption, we have to do smartphone augmented reality. So a lot of the target device for this became a cell phone where you would basically see the actor superimposed onto your video feed as you walk around and it's tracking your phone. So there wasn't a lot of pressure to have a super high quality, high resolution, movie quality, relightable asset for these. But they did lay a lot of the groundwork and some very significant advances in the field. And that takes us to today and the place where I actually work, because at our studio called Eyeline Studios, it's part of Netflix in Hollywood, California, we have a volumetric capture system. And we have one that does a couple of things that are trying to be a little bit new. In particular, in addition to having the cameras all around, we built it inside a virtual production volume, an LED volume. These are these volumes that you've seen where they'll take the whole soundstage and they'll put LED panels everywhere. So it's one big Jumbotron display everywhere around you. And we can play back any kind of 360 imagery on this display while we're capturing the actor. And that has like two principal uses, one of which is gives the actors something to react to, because they can see the environment that they're supposed to be doing their stuff in. Or we can put like a red dot and say, okay, look at this red dot, and then go look at the green dot. You can give eye lines in there. It's part of why we're called Eyeline Studios. But it also can help create some lighting on the actor that is the lighting that they will need for the scene that they're going to go into. So if you play back at least a rough version of the scene, you can get the overall directionality of the light to be baked into the texture maps for the actor, and that can save time and improve the realism of the compositing, even if we're not doing this time multiplex lighting trick like before. So I have three little projects that use this, and the first one is the latest Aquaman movie, and Jason Momoa himself, who's feeling a little hoarse. It's late in the shoot, so he's having a little trouble with his voice, but he would be very happy to help explain the process to you. Get this over here.
And this is pretty fun. It's Eyeline. Come check it out.
In the first movie, to create all the underwater movement with the actors, we would put the actors in these really uncomfortable rigs. Going into Aquaman 2, we knew that we need to find a better way to achieve that. And so I worked closely with Nick Davis, my visual effects supervisor, to see if we can come up with something easier for the actors so they can just focus on the acting, and easier for me to direct them as well. And they came back to me with this concept called Eyeline.
Eyeline enables us to basically do a volume capture. It involves 140 cameras in a digital volume that captures the performance of the actors, that basically drives a digital avatar of themselves. And we basically wrap the avatar with the digital performance, therefore giving us a completely sort of photorealistic version of the performance.
It's like basically like VR without the helmet. So we can pull off underwater scenes that you could never be able to do.
We're able to now give James the ability to put the camera anywhere he wants in the scene. The scene becomes three-dimensional. James can get any shot he wants, which I think is thrilling for him.
It's really groundbreaking, and it's actually allowing the actors the freedom to play it how they want to play it.
Around, baby. Yeah!
So that's an application where we're trying to do digital stunt doubles that look like the actor. Now they can really pretty faithfully have the actor's performance as well. So you don't have to like rig a digital character and try to keyframe animate their face to look natural. You can use their real facial performance that they got working with the director on there. And it's a pretty straightforward application into the film. Now, if you want to get even higher quality results, one of the things you can do is if you have a good digital humans department, which the big visual effects studios do, they have the ability to go with high-res scans of a face and kind of make a digital puppet of your actor that is accurate down to skin pores and fine creases. But it was always difficult to animate them realistically. What you can do is a hybrid approach where you have the volumetric capture that's like accurate to a couple millimeters, and then a high quality digital double that's been built using more traditional CGI techniques that's accurate to 1/10 of a millimeter. And you can use the volumetric capture to drive the animation of the digidouble. And the digidouble also can have really good reflectance properties like specular and diffuse and subsurface and little tiny vellus hairs on the edge that catch the light. And this got used in a film called The Flash that came out last year to do twinning of the lead actor Ezra Miller. So in this still, one of them is the real actor, and there's one of these things where there's like a time loop and he ends up meeting his younger self when he still lived with his parents. So like one of them's supposed to be 19, one of them's supposed to be 25 years old. They look pretty much the same, fortunately, and one of these guys is the CGI character and one of them's the real character. And it looks real enough so that, you know, watching the film the first time through, you don't really know which one's real and which one's CGI. And part of the fun of that is that they would have another actor, I think his name was Ed, would wear the clothes of the other character, and he would act the scene with Ezra Miller, and he would wear dangling a 360 camera. They called it the scorpion rig because it was like from his back and it went over the back and kind of to the head like a scorpion tail. And it would record a 360 image of the environment, of the lighting, and that could be played back on the LED panels, both so Ezra would have something to act to. He'd actually be able to see his own face in that video and kind of respond to it. And it would also help with getting the lighting closer to being the right lighting for what the capture would be.
There are many ways of creating doubling on a film, you know, over the shoulder, body doubles, face replacement. We used a new technology called volume capture. We used a series of 140 so cameras in a booth. The actor would stand in that booth, and then the cameras would capture every part of the way their body moved.
Volume capture in itself is you can capture an actor's performance, a real-time, 24 frames a second. What you have is real-time 3D data. Every frame is a 3D object, and it is photographic, so the lighting is sort of baked in, but you can manipulate it.
Harry, stop!
The lighting for the volume all comes from a witness camera that Ed wears on a scorpion camera rig on his back. And that kind of comes up his back and goes over his head and gives us exactly what the room is doing or what the set is doing in the location from Ed's sort of point of view. And that's important because that can be projected back on the walls of the volume, and that becomes the lighting for Ezra's head, face, body.
The fact that Andy and DJ decided to wholeheartedly bet on this brand new technology was a very brave thing to do. Technically, it was very challenging, and it worked.
I am the Flash.
All right. So
there are
more better superhero movies. The last example I'll show is from a sort of different kind of thing, which is an anime series called Yu Yu Hakusho, actually a Netflix show. And for this, they were using the volumetric capture to become pieces of the new characters, because in this show, they're doing a live action version, so it needs to look photoreal. It was eventually originally a cartoon. And there's creatures where like they have a very big body, but like a regular head, or it's just a very small person. And if you have volumetric capture, then you can create these kind of hybrid visual effects by putting like a human head onto a creature body.
Eyeline Studios is Netflix's innovation hub in the field of virtual production and production innovation.
You can do things that you actually never thought was possible. Technology that used to be only available in Hollywood blockbuster films is now available to a Japanese production.
Iつもは本当指先まで意識してお芝居をしてますけど、顔だけ、むしろこれはとても贅沢なことだ。 って思えたんですよね。むしろ表現の幅はものすごく広がる。
こういうの日本人は意外と好きかもしれないと思った。エモーションと同時にその言われたことをこう形としてできる。なんならもう日本人で初ってことですよね、ゴー君と。これすごいじゃないですか。こんなことないですから。
So getting realistic facial performances directly onto the characters is something that was always kind of a challenge, and with the volumetric capture, that helps out a lot. So we're very happy that our team won a Visual Effects Society Award last year for Best Emerging Technology in Volumetric Capture, because we were able to combine kind of LED volumes with these big camera arrays to record the faces in 3D. So back to these LED volumes, we've seen over the last 5 years a great deal of interest in using these stages of LED panels all around for things that don't involve volumetric capture, but for getting what they sometimes call in-camera visual effects. So it turns out these LED panel displays, which were designed for outdoor signage, or you have a music concert and you can see your performers up on stage magnified. They finally got high enough resolution that if you have your camera with a just shallow enough depth of field, it can produce a clear image of the background in the camera. So you can just have your actors here, and then you can have a digital background in back that is just there, and you capture it in camera. And if you build the whole stage around, you can also affect the lighting on the actors to be the accurate lighting for the scene as well. And that's kind of the grand theory of a virtual production stage, and there's been lots of them built. There's even been some built in Germany. But in practice, if you look at these two, these are examples from like the first 2 large-scale stages I know of. One was done in China for a movie called Asura in 2018, and then probably the best-known example in the United States, at least, came out later the following year with this Disney Plus TV show called The Mandalorian. But you'll notice in both of these stills I grabbed, they're actually not putting the image of the scene behind the actor. They put a little bit of blue screen or a little bit of green screen. And the reason for that is that in a lot of cases, it ends up being convenient to put a new background in during post-production anyway, either because the screen wasn't quite high enough resolution, or maybe there was like a aliasing effect between the LED pixels and your camera pixels called moire, or the final high-quality version of the scene just wasn't ready yet when we were filming the actors. There was a temporary version, you need to fix it, or you can see the seam between the wall and the ceiling. Lots of reasons. So in a lot of cases, I just asked people at the FMX conference, are we still putting green screen back there, even though you could put a real in-camera background? And a lot of times they still use some green screen. Everyone here is familiar with green screen. You can take the green pixels and replace them with your background, and now it looks like your actors or the nice person who's reporting the weather for the next week to be in front of a background they weren't really in front of. But for movie quality visual effects, actually, the process of putting actors onto a new background is a bit more intensive and manual, because once it's on a big movie screen, you really have to get that edge absolutely perfectly accurate. And you have to make sure that the sharpness of that edge is exactly as sharp as it should have been in the camera. And when people move, like in a movie, movies are 24 frames per second, and the shutter's open for half of that, usually. So that's a 48th of a second of motion blur that you get. And that's significant. If you move your hand, you'll get like, several fingers wide of motion blur when you move your hand like that. And you need, if you're going to put a new background in, make sure to have all of those effects of transparency and anti-aliasing really just correct. And green screen doesn't give you the answer right off the bat. They have to go in with compositing tools and fix all that up. And I've done a couple of projects trying to improve the quality of chroma keying techniques, or improving beyond those. And a lot of them try to shoot the alpha channel of your actor, the transparency matte, using another channel of information. And in fact, this technique goes back to the 1950s and 1960s. with something called sodium vapor matting. So this is a little bit of film history. But if you watch the movie Mary Poppins, the original one, there's this actor named Dick Van Dyke, and at some point he dances with some animated penguins. It's a really fun scene. And he's actually being composited onto an animated background. That wasn't really there in the studio. And it's really, really great compositing. There's good motion blur. Mary Poppins is sitting nearby watching him, and she has a semi-transparent veil, and you can see through that. And you wonder, like, how did they get such good compositing with film in the 1960s? Because we've seen lots of work on blue screen where, like, the edge looks like it's too hard, and, you know, you can feel like it's pasted in. Even in the original Star Wars movie, which used blue screen, the spaceships would whiz by, and if it was in front of another spaceship, you could see the edges around it too much, or the matte lines. Hitchcock's The Birds had these menacing birds flapping around that were composited in, and of course, bird wings are going to have tons of motion blur, and they did a good job with that because they used a technique called sodium vapor matting. And it basically was a way to shoot your alpha channel on a separate piece of film independently of the color image of your actors. So you made a 4-channel camera. And this was made possible because, first of all, there existed a kind of camera that would simultaneously expose 3 strips of film to the same light. And this was designed in the early days of color cinema. We knew for a while how to make a color movie film that could go to the theater and go in the projector, but we didn't know how to make color film that would actually shoot the movie. And the solution for a while was something called Technicolor. And you take 3 strips of black and white film, and you thread them all at the same time into the same camera. And this thing would have gears and things that would flop it around, and it would put it through a prism, and the prism would get the red light to one strip of film, the green to another, and the blue to another. So you get 3 black and white things for the red, green, and blue light, and then you can print it onto the film that'll go into the movie projector eventually. Well, once they invented color film that does this all with 1 strip of film, they didn't really need these cameras anymore. But they figured out a way to use it for visual effects, which is you run 2 strips of film. One's regular color film, which exists now, and the other one's black and white film, and you put in a different prism. And this prism would not take red, green, and blue and send it different places. It would take a particular wavelength of orangish yellow light, the wavelength that you get from a low-pressure sodium vapor lamp, and it would, with the prism, direct that particular wavelength, 589 nanometers, to a black and white strip of film. And that gives you something that's a holdout mat. It's like the silhouette of your actor, and it's exactly what you need to do the optical printing to put them on a new background. And then all the other wavelengths of light, the color image of the actor, except missing that one little bit of wavelength, ends up not mattering very much, would go to the other color piece of film. And that's how they got such great compositing in Mary Poppins, because they shot the matte for real without having to derive it. And those were the films I knew that used it, and since I now have done a little bit more research about it, it was actually used quite a lot. And in movies that I even saw growing up as a kid, like Pete's Dragon and Disney's The Black Hole. Apparently the last movie that ever used it was Dick Tracy in 1990. And I got this filmography from a really important cinematographer in our field named Peter Anderson, and he was one of the last people to use this process on a Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis movie that has a somewhat funny, maybe problematic title called Earth Girls Are Easy. But there were like 3 different aliens who were red and yellow and blue, and they had to composite them all at the same time, so it wouldn't have worked to have a blue screen or a green screen for that. Another thing I found out in my research is that we always assumed this was a process invented by and for and used at Disney. And actually the first movie that's on here called Plain Sailing wasn't a Disney production. It was 1956, well before Mary Poppins in 1964. And it was done in England, in the UK, by a company called the Rank Corporation. And I'd only seen this written in books, and with some effort I managed to find a version of the film. And I think if this plays here, we can look at one of the first sodium vapor shots, or possibly the first sodium vapor shot ever done. And it was done so that some of the shots, the movie takes place a lot on this boat, and some of them they're really at sea, and the actors are really on the boat. But at some point they probably realized, like, well, maybe some of the actors didn't really want to be on a boat and have to do their lines over and over. So they shot it in a studio, and they composited into movie footage of the water going back and forth. And you can definitely tell which is which, but here it is.
Set the log, will you, Tony? I'll take the wheel.
So that's a composite. That one's probably real. So he was okay with acting on the boat. Maybe these two weren't. I don't know.
He's turning. Good.
But it's like, it's not terrible. It's pretty good, actually.
I'm going to have a nap. Keep us south by west.
And for the
Keep
time, it was
windows
probably pretty
south by
convincing.
west. Shake us at 10 to 12.
So in 2021, the pandemic was still going on. I just started working for Netflix, and a lot of people were trying to keep themselves occupied during the pandemic with various new hobbies they would pick up, such as making sourdough bread, for example. It just kind of, what I got excited about is I thought, you know what, I think I would like to do some sodium vapor matting. And that meant that I had to find the components. And it's difficult to find the components, in particular because that prism that they used inside the Disney cameras to do Mary Poppins and such, the legend was it was missing. It had gone, like, actually people don't know where it is anymore. And it was assumed if you don't have that prism, you can't do sodium vapor matting. Now there's another problem, which is you also need sodium vapor lights. And you used to see sodium vapor lights all the time as nighttime lighting or in a tunnel, for example. And it would be in applications where, like, the light needs to be on all day, like inside a tunnel, but you don't want to have a huge power bill. And low pressure sodium vapor lights for the longest time were the most efficient lumens per watt that you could get. So you'd have the lowest power bill if you did this. The problem is all of your cars would look exactly the same color inside this light because it's monochromatic, exactly one wavelength. There's no way to differentiate color because all three of your cones are going to have the same proportional response no matter what they reflect off of. And now that we have LEDs, which are more efficient than sodium vapor, there's no reason to do that. And you can have normally lit tunnels with normal looking cars in them, and it's a lower power bill. So the first thing I had to do is, like, I had to get low pressure sodium vapor lights, and there's no place I could find where you just buy one, plug it in, and turn it on. You actually have to get the bulbs. Well, thank goodness they still make the bulbs at Philips, but then you have to, like, find a place to get a socket. You have to get a special ballast that's designed for the light that brings the current up at the right rate as it heats up. And then you have to find some kind of housing. And so all the references I could find suggested, like, maybe find a fluorescent light that has a good housing that's about the right size, rip out all the fluorescent stuff, and then put in your sodium vapor light. So this is one of the little things I did during the pandemic to build these lights. And then the next thing was, okay, we need the filter prism, right? And I presumed that getting a beam splitter prism with exactly the right coatings in the middle to send 589 this way and the rest of the visible spectrum through would be a little bit challenging to do, or at least cost some money. And I was kind of just spending my own money on this at the time. So I had the thought that maybe what we'll do is we'll just get a regular beam splitter prism that splits the light 50-50, and then I'll just filter it after the prism. So I just need to find one filter that lets 589 through, a bandpass filter, and another filter that notch rejects the 589 so that you get a regular color image without all that sodium vapor light. And after a little bit of searching, I found them. I found one. They actually make a bandpass filter for 589 because it's likely designed because there are sodium vapor lights and you might want to do that on an optical bench. And I found a notch reject filter at 594 that had a wider gap than the narrow gap of the bandpass, and they actually dovetailed quite well. And this came from a different company. I was very happy when I found that, and I measured them. I thought, okay, maybe we're going to be in business. And then I built out the little prism with the filters there. I got 2 cameras that can take a synchronization cable, and you can run them at the same time, and they really shoot the 2 images at the same time. I had some little T-slot framing to try to line them up as good as I could. And again, because it's the pandemic and you can't really go into the laboratory, in my backyard at night, I put a screen up on the wall, put the cameras here, I had a place to sit, and I put some LED lighting for the foreground lighting, sodium vapor on the screen in the back, and I was able to record simultaneous images of me in color and the sodium vapor wavelength that shows the matte or the alpha channel, the holdout matte that you would need to do a composite. And to make the point, I actually wore a very colorful shirt that I had been using to test color rendition and have been told that I should not wear outside for any other purposes for that, but I put it on for this. And the shirt has like all the colors of the rainbow in it, including some orange and yellow, and you can see those. And the magical thing is that those still, even though there's that notch reject filter that kills the region around 589, the wavelengths around them still look like yellow and orange to our eye because we have pretty broad spectral response in our cones. So it actually, with just a little bit of color correction, you're fine. You get a full color image and it's not a problem. And that's kind of the magic of what that system that the people invented back in the 50s could do. But at this point I realized, okay, well, it's clear my head is closer to the top of the frame in this image than this image. I mean, I can't get it pixel accurate with a screwdriver. So the next stop would be to like, okay, you have to line them up, you have to do the composites, fix it all up, and then I kind of lost steam. In fact, I actually had a better idea, or what I thought would be a better idea to do it, that wouldn't require shooting with 2 cameras for what I really wanted to do with this. So I kind of just set on the shelf. So you fast forward 3 years to this year, and in February, and I ran into some guys speaking at a conference about AI techniques for film production. And it's a group of young fellows who work out of downtown Los Angeles called the Corridor Crew, and they have a YouTube channel. And they put out YouTube videos pretty regularly where they talk about visual effects movies, and they say, oh, these effects are awesome, or that could have been better, and they go into the history of visual effects. And as I was talking to the lead guy named Nico, over here on the right, I found out that these guys had become somewhat obsessed about sodium vapor matting as a historical visual effects technique. And I told him, it's like, well, you know, I've got a system that, you know, I think does it, and if you want, I could bring it in. And they said that would be really great, because they had also bought into the notion that like, it was impossible to do this, like it had not been done in 30 years because the magic prisms had been lost. And on March 18th, last month, I brought it in, and then they made a little video about it, and they released it on April 7th. And this is basically the setup we did. They had one of the Corridor Crew members named JC. They got her to dress up very colorfully, all of the colors that would be hard for a green screen or a blue screen, and they had her wear a veil, kind of like Mary Poppins did, to show off the semi-transparency that you want to get with your matte. And then we lit the back there. I brought in LED lights that were designed to not have the sodium vapor wavelength in them. And I'll show like a little bit of like 3 minutes of the video here of how that came together. Well, I guess this is like our hello world of sodium vapor matting. We've got our color image and our sodium vapor image there.
There it is. Look at that.
That's the idea.
It's working. Paul, I would like to tell you about this character. Every time I approach a production company with it, they're like, no, can't do it, it's impossible. Okay. And it's a story about a clown that's trying to get married. The clown's getting married on Mars, hence the need to replace the background.
Oh, of course, yeah. I think this is going to be fantastic.
Now I suppose we should clean up the lighting.
Yeah, kill all of the full spectrum lighting.
So as you can see right now, we're spending a lot of time getting these flags up, because what we don't want to have happen is we don't want the sodium vapor light to be hitting JC at all, because then it's going to be basically turning her transparent.
So this is a spectral light meter. It tells you the spectrum of the light. For example, this light here, that shows it's LED lights. It's made made out of red, green, and blue LEDs to make the color white. And I can also take it and put it in front of the sodium vapor lights. There is our sodium vapor spike at 589 nanometers. So let's see if there's any sodium vapor light hitting our subject. Mostly good, but if I look closely here, I can see a tiny little blip. See that tiny little blip of sodium vapor?
Yeah. We're very close, but we're getting a little bit of side spill on her, and we're just cleaning that up here. If we're the first ones to do this in like 30 years, I want to do it right, you know? Looks like we almost have a perfect mat. I guess the only thing left to do is to shoot it.
Maybe we should shoot.
Cool, go ahead and roll the cameras. Here we are on Mars. The clown is looking for the groom. Uh-oh, there's aliens behind you. Maybe turn around, wave at the aliens. I want to get one shot of myself as well. Wearing my green hoodie, which I refused to take off.
Nico, I want to see you do some headbanging. I want you to throw that head around.
I think we got it.
That would be the hardest green screen shot. That would be so hard to do on a green screen.
And cut.
I would love for this to pay off.
Here are the results, and I'll let you guys be the judge.
Whoa! Wow! That's wild!
Dude, it's Mary Poppins.
This is amazing. It's incredible.
No, you dog! Water! He's drinking water on Mars! This is my favorite one. The water is just such a flex.
Check out the motion blur.
Oh, the hands. Oh!
Wow!
The motion blur drops the color exposure correctly on the background right there. Turns it red.
Oh, correct math. Oh my God, it's so good.
Dude, those little tiny hairs on top, oh my God.
And I didn't have to do any work.
You didn't have to tweak your like white clip, black
No,
clip.
I hate that.
D-spill bias?
No, there's no spill.
What about your edge feather?
No edge feather, no D-spill, no messing with gamma of your mat, no thresholds, no restoring fringe, no cleaning the blacks, no cleaning the whites, nothing.
You just turn it on.
You just turn it on.
Wow.
Good job, good job.
That is amazing.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
All right, so they added a lot of punch to the whole process there. And amazingly, the thing kind of, it blew up. There are probably more people that know about sodium vapor matting in the world than ever before in history by at least a factor of 100 at this point. And lots of very positive comments, excited about it. As I was putting together the talk for FMX, I was trying to look up a little historical fact about the sodium vapor process. This video is now one of the things on the Wikipedia page for the sodium vapor process. And I just found out at dinner last night from someone who teaches film at USC that at the moment it is impossible to buy a beam splitter online when they tried, because everyone apparently is trying to go and set up a similar system for this. So who knows, maybe the next feature film to do sodium vapor matting isn't too far off. I wanted to mention that one of the things that's important, at one point one of the characters says like, oh my gosh, correct math. There is actually a correct math way to do the compositing, and there's a couple of wrong ways to do it. So last night was the SIGGRAPH posters submission deadline, and I submitted a little poster just on the project to say how the math should go. And you can do this all visually here, and that's kind of doing it in our software we had in our lab called HDR Shop. But basically, you start by shooting your two images, and there's already been a little processing here so far because the sodium vapor mat image has been flipped, because the beam splitter actually shoots a mirror image for that, and you just flip it, and that's okay because the rolling shutters go the same direction and it's still fine. The first thing you need to do is make sure you move it into linear pixel value space. You want your pixel values to be proportional to the amount of light. And there's so many image formats where it's like gamma encoded or log encoded, and if you try to do math on that kind of stuff, it's not going to give you the right results. So make sure it's linearized, and then do your additions, subtractions, multiplications, and divisions on linear data and remap it at the end if you need to. You'll notice like the sodium vapor image, it kind of gets dark in the corners here, and it's not perfectly white here. It's yellow, obviously, and it's not the pixel value 1. So there's also problems on the foreground element. It has, very colorful, but it's actually not black in the background. And you want the actor shot against pure black so that when you add them into the scene, they don't bring any of their original background when they try to go onto the new background. So to do that, We very thankfully remembered to shoot what's called a clean plate, where the actor is not in the scene and you shoot what the background looks like without the actor. So we got a clean plate of the foreground and the background. And you actually get your matte by dividing the pixel values of the sodium vapor matte by the clean plate. So this image divided by this image equals this image, and where they're the same, you get 1, and where this is silhouetted, you get 0, and so that's your 0 to 1 matte. So one thing though, your blue channel is total garbage in both of these images because there's no blue light, and so it's just pure noise, so you get lots of divide by zeros all over your blue. So don't use the blue channel, I just use the average of the red and green channels. And then the next thing that you need to do is you have to line the two up. This is what I got lazy in 2021 and I stopped doing it. When the corridor crew guys seemed interested, I thought, okay, here's some people who will put some effort into doing this so we can get this to line up. So if you look at her, under her elbow, you know, I tried to get it right, but in the physics, but you can see she shifts. So what we did is we had this cardboard, it had holes in it, and we saw it in both cameras. And since the cameras were optically put to be the same distance behind the beam splitter, same model of lens, focused at the same distance, it should just be a two-dimensional transformation between the two. And it should even have the same lens distortion in both. So we really can just do it with a homography. That's like a transformation that keeps straight lines straight from one to the other. To do a homography, you just need to mark 4 corresponding points in each image, and then a little 3x3 homogeneous matrix transformation will then transform all of your pixels. So we take the matte, and then we line the matte up to the foreground. You can see like the elbow matches, everything matches up, and we got a very satisfying match there. So next problem is we have to get rid of all this bounce light behind the subject. Those LED lights that lit JC, I couldn't stop the photons from hitting the background, unfortunately. So the good news is, since we have a really good matte for her, we're not just going to use that matte to put her on a new background. We're going to use that matte to take her off of the original background. So that's the original background. If we multiply that by the matte, the holdout matte, it gives you an image of basically what the bounce light is. And so you can subtract it off. And now we see JC on a black background, which is what you're going to eventually want to add onto the background. The lights I was using were RGB LEDs. There's white LEDs that have broad spectrum and better color rendition, but I intentionally used bad color rendition RGB LEDs because they have a gap in the spectrum between the red and the green so that the sodium vapor wavelength doesn't have any interference, so you get a cleaner matte on the sodium channel. And that means you do need to do some color correction on your foreground. So we also remembered to shoot a color chart, and that's what the color chart looked like. And if you sample those colors, this is the pixel values that you got, but we actually know what the color chart value should look like for given primaries. This is the sRGB primaries. So what you do is you solve for a 3x3 matrix that does its best job of taking those RGB values at the top to the RGB values at the bottom, and then you can apply that same matrix to all of JC, and it transforms her colors so that she's got a little bit more neutral point and better coloration and better skin tone. And at this point, we're just basically almost done. You just have to download your background image, and I knew that the guys wanted her to be on Mars, so I found a nice picture of Mars. And then to put her on there, you multiply the background by the holdout matte, and that basically creates space for JC to layer into. And you notice it's already got like the semi-transparent stuff in here, so it's taken away the right amount of background. It's got the motion blur, it's got the slightly out of focus stuff, and then you just add JC on, and she's composited in there very naturally. And even though there's a number of mathematical steps to go through here, there really isn't anything super manual about it other than like clicking those 4 points. We could probably figure out a way to automate that. And so much of compositing in Hollywood now, there's people who have to key stuff out and they're building spline curves, they're using different parameters for different parts of the image, and it's a lot of effort that very creative people could be spending better somewhere else. So the real reason that I actually started doing this project was not just to occupy myself during the pandemic, but I was thinking that if we ever want to create an algorithm that does a really good job of figuring out your matte without a green screen, without a blue screen, without even a yellow screen, and you just have an image of the actor there, maybe an algorithm could figure that out, but it would need lots of training data to show you what real foreground elements look like and real alpha channels look like, and how to tease it all apart. And I didn't think of any good way to get training data for that. So this last little bit that I'll show you of the video is talking about how we thought this could be useful for virtual production, if you could automatically composite actors off of a background and put them on a new one, and B, how it's a way to get training data.
What about a volume? Couldn't you use a volume?
In today's age, when you can just go and shoot on a volume with an LED screen, is sodium vapor worth pursuing?
In practice, a lot of those in-camera backgrounds will get replaced.
So it seems like we're still in a world where we need to be able to cut out backgrounds and put people on new things.
Yeah, flexibility in post-production is incredibly valuable. One thing that you're noticing is like compositing tools are getting better because they're starting to have a bit of machine learning inside of them. Machine learning needs training data. The question is, where do you get all that training data? There is no perfect, easy compositing technique. And I thought this would be a good way to do it.
And so that's what we're hoping to do, is shoot a lot of training data with ground truth, high quality alpha channels. Now, I mentioned that I didn't end up shooting lots of sodium vapor stuff because I thought of another way to do it. And I realized it's kind of a pain to have two cameras and you have to line them and you get twice as much data and all that. And inspired by sodium vapor matting, where you basically shoot the red, green, and blue of your actor, and you create a fourth channel for the sodium vapor to shoot the alpha channel, I thought, well, maybe we can do it with one camera. If instead of using the three channels to shoot red, green, and blue, we use one of those channels to shoot the alpha channel, to shoot the matte. And we'll then figure out how to restore that later with another process, maybe with machine learning. And that was the idea behind this last thing I'll show you today, which is called magenta green screen. And essentially, it's a way of getting high quality mattes where you use the green channel to get the high quality matte. And you can do that on a virtual production stage because you have control of the color of light everywhere on those LED panels. So you can actually turn off all the green light on your actor and you only have red and blue light on them. And if you put a little bit of green in the background, then you're shooting the actor silhouetted against green. If you look at the green channel, then the actor is dark and the background is light, and you have a perfect matte recorded in your best channel, your green channel. And then you get a good blue channel of the actor, and you get a good red channel. You're just missing the green channel for the actor, which is admittedly a problem. But the thought was that we can restore that using machine learning kind of as like a image colorization process. So let's see here. So these are kind of showing our four channels of red, green, blue, and alpha. That's what you really want to capture. And it actually does seem a little bit silly that if you only get to capture 3 of those channels on your sensor, that you'd choose these 3 and figure that one out later. Because that's the one that looks more different than any of the other ones. It's the most linearly independent channel of those. So we had the idea, like, let's capture this one, forget about that one, and then get this one. So don't do green, but do get alpha, and that could be useful. So I'll blow through here, and I'll just quickly go through this video. So that's our filming setup. And again, I'm not saying this is how we're going to shoot a movie, but it's how we're going to capture lots of training data. So if you have your actors on the green screen lit only by magenta light, then these are basically the channels you get. You get a good red and blue channel here, but there's no green channel for the actors, but they are against black, that's nice. And then your green channel is a great matte. That's as good as the sodium vapor matte ever was. And what we need then is to somehow restore the green channel. Now there's a kind of a cheap way to restore green, which you'll see in a second. This is really, really cheap. You just make your green channel the average of your red and blue channels. And believe it or not, that works better than you'd think. And in fact, there's a whole series of movies that were shot with those old Technicolor cameras where they tried to be cheap, and they only ran 2 strips of film. And they basically put the long wavelengths on one strip of film, the short wavelength on the other, two-strip Technicolor. They only had a 2D color space. And it worked for Westerns, because if you're out in the American West in the 1860s, there isn't much green, there isn't much purple, and you get, you know, skin tones, blue sky, clouds, and dust and dirt. And that's kind of what you can show with that color space. So I was just trying that. You can turn your green channel monochrome and then your matte's good. But the idea was actually, maybe before we shoot the actors with the magenta green, we'll shoot them under white light and we'll get a rehearsal take and we'll show what's going to train an algorithm what they should look like in full color. And they won't do exactly the same thing they're going to do under the magenta green, but you get all these training examples of images that say, if the red channel is this and the blue channel is this, the green channel is that. And you can train a little special network to then take new images of them where you only have the red and blue channels and guess what the green channel is. And it's like, it's kind of like colorizing an image, right? There's networks that you give it a black and white image, it imagines the color. This is an easier problem. We got 2 channels, we just need 1 more to get to 3 instead of 2 more to get to 3. So that's what we did. And Dima Smirnov over in the Netflix group did a great job of that. So let's see if we can show our rehearsal take here. Okay, so this is the training data of them doing like a rehearsal on a black background. And then we'll do the shot. This is machine learning colorization. We only had the red and blue channels. We've used the ML to restore the green. And it works well. I tried to make it hard. I gave them, one had a green bottle, one had a red bottle, and I had to figure out which bottle is which. There's our alpha channel, there's a new background. We can composite them on colorized, and it's high quality composite. They're on another background. And since they're on an LED stage, we can actually compare to ground truth by literally putting the background on the LEDs behind them. And so that's totally real on the right, and then that's synthetically added on the left, and they compare pretty favorably. So when it comes time to capture lots of training data, we might do that. By the way, you don't have to do magenta green. You can also do yellow blue. You could do cyan red. You can pick any color channel to be your matte, and you can train a network to restore it. They actually all seem to work as equally well. And I think with that, we're getting toward the end of the talk, so maybe let me thank some collaborators here. Let's thank everyone here at Bonn, and if there's any time, I can answer a question. Thanks for coming.
Are we on? All right. Thank you so much for this amazing talk, Paul. Thanks for coming. We do have some time for questions. So if any of you or the Zoom participants would like to ask Paul a question, please feel free to raise your hand and we can pass you a mic.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Of course, with the new sodium vapor or even like the new green screen that you explained right now, it's pretty new, but I'm wondering, did you have time to find some problems with this technique? Because like it feels like this holy grail of visual effects that has no problems at all, and we finally have a way to perfectly key footage. But like back in time, we also thought we have green screens, blue screens. Finally, we have a way, but with time we learned like there's still problems.
Yeah. So the history of like why sodium vapor matting went away, it's not really because they lost the prisms. I mean, that is actually a problem, but the thing is it wasn't used a lot because green screen and blue screen techniques, which were contemporaneous, those even go back to before sodium vapor matting, but they had problems. Sodium vapor matting was beating them for quite a while, but eventually they got good enough. Maybe they never got quite as good as sodium vapor matting or quite as automatic, but it was just way easier to use a normal movie camera instead of these old, decades old Technicolor cameras. And I would say that for sodium vapor, for me to run those 2 cameras and have to line the images up, be tricky, and it would be hard to shoot a shot where the focus racks from close to far. Like sometimes you start focused on one character and then the other one has a thought and you like zoom the focus to them. You need those two cameras like mechanically instrumented to keep the focus the same. Now Hollywood does do that to shoot 3D movies. They typically use a sort of a beam splitter rig because the motion picture cameras are much bigger than the distance between the eyes, so they'll have one camera look through a 45-degree half-silvered mirror, and the other camera will look up into it, and then they can actually adjust the effective interocular distance all the way to having it be lined up. So you could use one of those in a special beam splitter to do sodium vapor. And again, I'm guessing somebody will do it at some point just to have fun. Like filmmakers, like Dune 2 uses near-infrared cameras for some scenes to be interesting. Martin Scorsese's The Aviator had a whole sequence that was shot ineffectively or treated to look like two-strip Technicolor with that limited color palette that we talked about. So someone will do sodium vapor. And I think what will happen is I think that AI-driven techniques to do the compositing, I think there's a really good chance that those could be really, really good using either this technique or some other technique to get high-quality training data, and then maybe, you know, all of it's just for history at this point.
All right. Any more questions, Eduard?
Hello, thank you. One follow-up question. So I think at this year at NAB, they've presented RGB and cyan yellow screens, and at the same time, I think I/O, who is very popular with volumetric studios, they create in collaboration cameras where you can have this spectral on the chip, basically. Do you think that basically reproducing what you're trying here with two cameras could be feasible with one camera and LED?
Yes, I would absolutely love to do that. So, you know, 99.999% of cameras are RGB. There are some specialty sensors you can get out there. There's like a fun one from Sony that senses polarization, and like the different pixels have different linear polarizers at different angles, so you can do ellipsometry of your signal. They do make a sensor that's RGB and clear. So you get kind of a fourth spectrum, and the clear actually covers more of the near infrared. So one of my earliest projects in this area, I built a compositing system where there was a beam splitter and the color image was RGB, and then the matte image was done in near infrared light. And to do that, I had to get a black cloth that reflected infrared light to be the background. And it turns out lots of black cloth actually does reflect infrared light. You can go with a Sony Handycam night vision and go to your fabric store and pick the fabric that looks bright, the black fabric section, and pick the brightest one you can see in the night vision camera, and raise some eyebrows when you're in there, of course, too. But and that actually worked pretty well. This is a project for SIGGRAPH 2002 when the first time we surrounded actors with the color LEDs, and I had to do that with two different cameras and line up the images for that. But one of these sensors that basically can do RGB and near infrared, that might be the easiest way to do it. I don't know anyone who makes like red, green, yellow, blue. That would be fantastic. Probably possible to make it. And what you'd want is the spectral response. Like normally in an RGB camera, there's like the red spectral response, the green and the blue, and they tend to make them so that they overlap a bit. Part of the reason is that it's a bit more like the human eye. Another reason is you get a better signal to noise ratio in your Luma channel if generally all the things have a broader spectral response and they sense more of the light. To get a really good high quality matte though, you'd want to make those sensors so that they don't overlap very much. So you want red, yellow, green, blue. And I think that would be a fantastic sensor. I'm absolutely sure that you wouldn't be de-Bayering it, you'd be whoever we're going to credit this one with. And you could sell the manufacturer saying like, oh, you can actually get better color balancing, right? Like if you're going to shoot people under different color temperatures of light or different spectra of light, if you shoot 4 channels, you can actually color balance it better afterwards. If you're doing normal photography, and if you're doing visual effects stuff, you just use the yellow for the matte. So I'd love it if someone made a sensor. Maybe Matthias, you can use some of your hardware design skills and your connections and get one of those.
You should probably really talk to I/O. They have really narrow bandwidth cameras in cooperation. So I think you will find a solution there.
Awesome, that would be great. Okay.